Yeah, okay. I again welcome you all. I'll just briefly introduce myself first and then we'll move on to the session. So I'm Yashwin. I go by Dehi pronouns and I'm currently coordinating R&D department here in Bachpan Save the Innocence. Talking about Bachpan Save the Innocence, we are an NGO. We work, as you can see on your screens as well. We work to prevent and to make the public aware about child sexual abuse. That is our vision. Our vision is that everyone should be aware and vocal about child sexual abuse, which is bal yawn shoshan. uh, and how we do this, like how do we make people aware, and how are we being vocal about this issue. The first thing is that we go to schools and colleges and we give sessions. These sessions are related to the topic. We give body safety sessions to kids, and we make adults aware, like parents and the college going kids. We make them aware about what is child sexual abuse and how they can pitch in and prevent this particular issue. uh, this is one pillar of our organization. Next pillar is that we have a department called Hope, which is Hold On Pain Ends, where you know we have adult survivors of child sexual abuse, where we support them with listening circles and art therapy sessions to help them in their in their healing journey. So that's one other thing that we do. And we also provide legal and systemic action. This is We have another department called legal team, basically, where they support the children and their parents to report the case, and to follow up in the courts and in the legal aspect. That's how they support. So that is what we do in Bachpan Save the Innocence. Um Moving forward about today's topic, so today we are here to have this session on uh, the silence we create, unmasking CSA for children with disabilities. So as you are aware that children with disabilities are also a major part of our society, and these children are often overlooked. So we are here today. We have our volunteer who dedicated this research. Vedika dedicated their time, and they researched about this topic, and they have the paper published also for in this particular in this particular topic only. So Vedika will be taking over this session today, and yeah, Vedika, you can introduce yourself. And but before we have do we have
Vidushi, let me check. I don't think so. She has joined Abhi.
okay, then maybe we can have them talk about this topic, maybe in between of the session, or like at the end.
Yes, for sure. Uh, just the leaders that we have here with us, I would request to make sure the team members from your respective departments are there. And meanwhile, all the best, Vedika.
Thank you, Tanvay. Thank you, Yashmin.
Yeah.
Can we start?
Yeah, maybe you just go to another slide.
Sure.
So before we officially begin, I just and Vedika take over the session. I would just request everyone, if you have already filled the pre-assessment form, that is well and good. If you're still left to do that, please have it filled. Uh, Vedika, can you just show the QR code? Yeah, this is the QR code. You can scan it and fill the pre-assessment form. It's just our R&D's metric to check if these sessions are impactful enough. So if you have already taken, you can skip this part. Rana, can we also paste that in the chat box? Yeah. Okay, thank you. Yeah, over to you, Vedika.
Can we give time to them for filling the pre-assessment form? Or
Yeah, you
should we?
can start with the introductions. Yeah.
Sure. Okay, thank you so much, Yashwin, for introducing me. Okay, as Yashwin said, I have presented this paper. I'm a volunteer at Bachpan NGO, and I am a volunteer in two departments of it. One is the facilitation department, and the other is the R&D department. I'm the overall coordinator of VMS and the budding coordinator in R&D department itself. Apart from being a volunteer in Bachpan NGO, I am a final year student pursuing BA honors in public administration with my minors in history and sociology. I had written this paper for one of the conferences, and it has been published in Pranama journals. So, as you can see, the topic is about the silence we create, unmasking CSA, which is child sexual abuse for children with disabilities, and it's a Crip theoretical perspective on structural exclusion. Now, before we dive in, let's acknowledge the room we are entering. We are discussing child sexual abuse, which is CSA, and marginalized communities. Even for us as professionals, this is heavy. This session is for learning, but your well being comes first. If you need to step away from your screen or mute for a moment, please do so. No explanation is needed. Can I get a quick thumbs up from everyone to signify that we are ready to create this safe space together? Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much. Okay, so before we begin, I want to know that what is CSA? When I say child sexual abuse, what comes to your mind? How could we define that what is child sexual abuse? Can anyone please unmute and answer, or maybe you can write your answers in the chat box. Can anyone please let me know what comes to your mind when we hear what is CSA or what is child sexual abuse?
Vedika, we have Nishai saying exploitation in the chat box.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Correct. Can be considered. Anything else? Violation. Okay.
Something related to children.
Something related to children. That is why it is called child sexual abuse. Okay, so let's understand it. CSA, child sexual abuse. So it's basically three words: child, sexual, and abuse. Who's a child? Can anyone please tell me? Who do we consider a child?
Anyone
Below
under
the age of
18.
18.
Yeah, below the age of 18 is a child. Okay. So we've understood who is a child, who is considered a child. Then comes the term sexual, which means in child sexual abuse that it is related to a child's private parts. And there are four private parts in a child's body, that is the lips, the genitals, the hips, and the chest. And then comes the word abuse. So abuse in itself is something जहाँ पर किसी बच्चे को he has the feeling of that someone is कोई उसको harm कर रहा है, या कोई उसको नुकसान पहुंचा रहा है, या उसको दर्द दे रहा है. So child sexual abuse और बाल यौन शोषण, यानी कि बच्चों के private part से related शोषण होना, that is child sexual abuse. Are we there together till this? Can I get a thumbs up from everyone? Thank you. Okay, so now comes the another term, which is disability, through which I have linked the paper itself, that we are studying, or we are going to discover that how child sexual abuse is not so well spoken among disabled children. So disability, it's not just a medical condition. It is the result of interaction between a person's long-term physical, mental, intellectual, or sensory impairments and various societal barriers. These barriers, whether they are physical obstacles, communication gaps, or negative attitudes, hinder a person's full and effective participation in society on an equal basis with others. So before we truly understand that how I have linked this paper with the concept of child sexual abuse, I would love everyone to see this video on disability so that you get a better idea that what is a disability.
One of the best things about the world we live in is how many different kinds of people there are. Some people might look like you, and some people look different than you. Throughout your life, you will get to meet people with all sorts of abilities and disabilities. A disability is a physical or mental difference that makes it challenging for the person to partake in and access society's services and activities. Some disabilities are obvious, like seeing someone in a wheelchair, and others are not visible, like someone who's dyslexic and has trouble reading. People with disabilities may need assistance with certain tasks, but it's important to remember that there is so much more to a disabled person than their disability. Sometimes we learn to feel sorry for disabled people and we think of them as being helpless. But the truth is that because of how our society is set up, disabled people are often put at a disadvantage. This means that the world is not always accommodating to the vast number of disabilities that exist on this planet. When disabled people are unable to access the same things as able-bodied people and with dignity, they experience a form of discrimination called ableism. Discrimination is an action, inaction, or decision that leads to unequal treatment of people, in this case, disabled people. When we do not create a level playing field for how disabled people experience the world, their basic human rights are ignored. This is why we need to be aware of what other people need, not just ourselves. For example, if you don't use a wheelchair, you might never understand the financial costs or difficulties with getting around. This is why it's so important to treat disabled people with respect and ask them what they need and want. Some people are born with disabilities, and some people develop them throughout their lives. Every disabled person is unique and has their own opinions and experiences with their disability. It's okay to be curious about people's differences, but we need to approach questions and curiosities with respect. Always ask permission before approaching someone, touching assistive devices, or asking questions about their story. And remember, everyone deserves kindness. Never assume what people can or can't do. Don't assume that disabled people need help or that there is something wrong with them. Disabilities are normal. Let's make this world a comfortable place for everybody to exist.
Thank you so much, everyone. I hope we got a better idea of what is a disability. Thank you. Thank you so much, everyone. Oh, okay. So before we finally begin the session, I would love you all to go through the contents as to what we will discuss in the session today. First, we'll talk about the silent crisis of CSA and disability. Then we'll move on to the theoretical foundations which have been used in the paper itself. And then comes the intersectionality and disability. Then we'll talk about the Crip theory because my paper is on Crip theoretical perspective. Then we'll move on to the Indian legal and policy frameworks which we have for this particular issue in India itself, and what are the structural barriers and vulnerabilities. And in the last, we'll talk about that how we can have a collective responsibility. We can play a role of collective responsibility. Moving ahead, let's discuss about the silent crisis of CSA and disability. So before we discuss this, today is April 11th, and we are currently in Sexual Assault Awareness Month, SAAS, a global movement to raise awareness and prevent sexual violence. This month reminds us that silence is biggest barrier to justice. And the theme for 2026 is building connected communities. But we have to ask ourselves, are our connected communities truly inclusive? Does our awareness reach the child who cannot speak, the child who cannot walk, or the child who is hidden in a sheltered home? This session isn't just academic requirement, it's an act of advocacy for SAAM. We are here to ensure that when we say end sexual violence, We mean it for every child, regardless of their ability. Now, I want you all to look at this image. The finger to the lips is the universal sign for whoosh. In the world of child sexual abuse, this silence is usually forced by the abuser. But for children with disabilities, the silence is often forced by us, by a society that doesn't provide them with the tools to speak up. As we move through Sexual Assault Awareness Month this April, we are here to unmask this silence. Today isn't just about awareness, it's about breaking the hush for those who have been left behind. Now, I want all you to answer that when you hear the term silent crisis, what is the first barrier that comes to your mind? You can either unmute and answer or you can type it in the chat box. I'll repeat my question. When you hear the term silent crisis, what is the first barrier that comes to your mind?
Like not able to tell about the crisis, about the assault to the people.
Correct. Thank you, Afifa. Ignorance, unable to express yourself, unspoken problems, inability to communicate, and fear. Oh, thank you so much, everyone. Um, yes, Yashwin.
Yeah, hi. Sorry to disturb Vedika. I think Vidushi has joined us.
Okay.
Uh, yeah, I'll just quickly introduce Vidushi. So, I I hope Vidushi you are here. Yeah. Okay. So Vidushi is leading the inclusion movement. It's another organization where they implement structured volunteer-led programs supporting children and adults with disabilities. So it's really an honor to have you here with us, Vidushi, and we would want to hear from you as well before we start with the session. So yeah.
Thank you. Yes, I. Oh. No, I think I would reserve myself towards the end. Let her go ahead and let Vedika present, and then I shall pitch in. That's all right.
Yeah, sure. We would love to hear from you as well, Vidushi.
Sure, definitely. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, over to you, Vedika.
Thank you so much, Vidushi. Thank you, Yashwin. Okay, so I had asked a question and I got lot of responses for it. The multiple dimensions we have got is true about when we hear the term silent crisis. So, this is what the first part is all about, discussing that what is the silent crisis of CSA and disability. As we move ahead, the first point in this is hidden in plain sight. So, I want you to notice the photos on the right of the children. So they are vibrant, smiling, and present in our communities. Yet, statistics show they face a significantly higher risk of abuse. They are hidden because our protection policies often fail to see their specific needs. This isn't just a presentation, it's an advocacy session. We aren't just looking at the defects of a child, we are looking at the defects of our system. Our mission today is to move from being bystanders to becoming architects of an inclusive protection strategy. Now, I want you all to look at the colorful handprints in the top photo. Every child has a unique print, a unique way of communicating. So there's another question which I would love to pose to all of you, that if a child verbally cannot say, I am in danger, what other prints or signs should we as professionals be looking for? I'll repeat my question. If a child cannot verbally say, I am in danger, what other prints or signs should we as professionals be looking for? Okay. Facial expression, sign language, behaviors. Correct. So these are the expression and behavior: fear, stress, anxious behavior. Correct. So these are the other signs we can look for when a child who's disabled cannot speak that he is in danger. So now I have an activity for all of you. It is called the net hole activity. And before we look at the data, I want to share a simple visualization. Imagine our child protection system, the laws, the police, the NGOs, as a vast safety net. So they're the vast safety net spread out across society. Its only job is to catch any child who is falling into danger. Now, imagine the mesh of that net. For a child who can speak clearly and has a supportive family, that mesh is tight and strong. They are caught. But for the children we are discussing today, children with disabilities, the net looks very different. So I want you to think about the gaps in this net. Now, if a child cannot verbally report abuse, is that a hole in the net or a defect in the child? I'll repeat my question. If a child cannot verbally report abuse, is that a hole in the net or a defect in the child? Net. Correct. It's a hole in the net, not a defect in the child, because as we um, had it earlier as well, more than a medical problem, it's a social barrier that the society itself has created, that they're not able to come up and report abuses. The other question is that if a police station has no sign language interpreter, how wide does the hole become? I'll repeat my question. If a police station has no sign language interpreter, how wide does that hole become? More wide. Correct, Sports. Thank you. It does become very, very wide if the child itself goes and reports, have the courage to report that abuse, but there are no sign language interpreters or there's no one who could understand what they're trying to say. So, as you can see, the vulnerability we talk about isn't just about a child's disability, it's about the holes we have left in our net. Today, we aren't just here to study those holes, we are here to learn how to sew them shut. Now we move forward, which talks about unveiling the overlooked victims. We begin by acknowledging that child sexual abuse is a global epidemic, but it often remains a taboo topic. However, within this already marginalized subject, there is a group that is even further overlooked, that is children with disabilities. Now, why the focus is more on children with disabilities? Because the silence in these cases isn't just about a lack of words, it is often a lack of support. Statistics shows that these children are significantly more vulnerable, yet they are the least represented in our safety programs. As I discussed earlier, the paper is on Crip theoretical research perspective. So I am approaching this through the Crip theory. This framework helps us disrupt the normative ideas. So the Crip theory is all about that. It disrupts the normative ideas that of how a victim should act or speak. It allows us to view disability not as a tragedy, but as a unique identity that requires unique justice. Now, I want you to answer a question that if a child cannot speak, is that a medical problem or a societal one? I'll repeat my question. If a child cannot speak, is that a medical problem or a societal one? Societal one. Correct. Thank you so much. It's a societal problem, not just a medical problem. And that is what the Crip theory also says. And so we are moving away from the idea that disability is the problem to be cured. The child's body is not the barrier. our ability to adapt is. Finally, we aren't here to blame individuals. We are here to analyze the systemic failures, the gaps in our laws, the lack of interpreters in police stations, and the biases in our courts that keep these victims hidden in plain sight. Okay, so now we move on to the objectives. The first objective is examining vulnerabilities. Our first goal is to look at the specific risk factors like caregiver dependency and communication barriers that abusers exploit. We aren't just looking at the disability, but how the environment makes these children the targets is the main point that we are talking about when we examine the vulnerabilities of children with disabilities who face child sexual abuse. The second objective is reconceptualizing child protection systems. So we need to change how we think. Current protection frameworks often treat disability as a medical problem. We want to reconceptualize this by using Crip theory to challenge the normal assumptions and build systems that actually fit the diverse needs of all these children. The third objective is disability inclusion, inclusive interventions. So finally, we move to the how. So we'll discuss how to integrate disability inclusive interventions like accessible reporting tools and sign language interpreters into our laws and NGO protocols to ensure that no child is left behind by the justice system. So now I want you to look at the picture which is used in the background of the image. I hope you had the time to look at it. Can I get a thumbs up from everyone if you have taken time? Oh, thank you. Now think of this red door as the justice we are trying to reach. The path is currently dark and full of obstacles for children with disabilities. Now, these three objectives are the light we are using to illuminate that path. Now, I want you to answer a question that which of these three paths, that is, understanding vulnerabilities, reconceptualizing the child protection systems, or taking action, do you feel is the most urgent in your daily work? Out of all of these three, out of these three objectives, which is the most important one, or do you feel is the most urgent one in your daily work? First one, third one, examining vulnerabilities. Second one. Okay, now that each one of us have different point of view on this, it's just that all of these objectives are somewhat equal in playing that role of being urgent. Why? Because if we cannot examine the vulnerabilities, obviously we cannot bring about the change in the systems, or we cannot bring about the interventions we are aiming for. So it's just that all these three objectives somehow go hand in hand when we talk about the urgent needs of it. Now, as we move on to the second part of it, and now that we have understood the what and the why of the crisis, we must look at the how, specifically how we perceive disability itself. Can anyone please tell me, how do you perceive disability? What is disability according to you? Can anyone please tell me what is a disability according to you? How do you perceive disability? You can either unmute and say, or you can send in the chat box. The person was not able like others. Thank you, Afifa. a natural lack or missing ability that most people have. Thank you, Rana. Okay, so now that we have two perspectives of how people perceive disability, unable to do some work which normal person can do, a natural phenomena which causes a person to deviate from typical bodily functions, inconvenience of a personal to have normal life as others. Correct. Thank you so much, everyone, for your responses. So now that we have perspectives of how we perceive disability, our action in child protection are always driven by our underlying beliefs and theories. In this section, we will establish a common vocabulary. To build an inclusive system, we first need to dismantle outdated perspectives that have historically marginalized disabled children in legal and social spaces. The objective here is to move beyond seeing disability as just a medical condition. We're going to explore the models and theories that allow us to see the person and the systemic barriers they face rather than just the impairment. Now, as you can see in the illustration, disability is diverse. It isn't just about a wheelchair or a cane, it's a spectrum of human experience. This section is about learning to see that entire spectrum clearly. So, before we dive into the theories, I want you to think for 5 seconds. In your own work, do you find yourself trying to fix the child's condition or fixing the lack of a ramp or interpreter? I'll repeat my question. In your own work, do you find yourself trying to fix the child's condition or fixing the lack of ramp or interpreter? Second, fixing the lack of a ramp or interpreter. Thank you, Prabjeet. Second. Thank you so much, everyone. So yes, that is the correct answer to it, that we cannot fix the child. We have to fix the society, the systemic barriers, and the societal barriers we have created ourselves. So we move forward to understanding the theories I have used in the paper, and that is what we discuss about it in the session as well. First is the medical model, which says that the individual is the problem. Why it says the individual is the problem? Because the medical model says that it's the individual who needs the fixation, not the society. So the core belief here is that disability is an impairment that needs to be cured, fixed, or managed to make the person normal. Now, in this diagram, this red circle, the arrows point inward. This symbolizes that the problem is contained within the person, and the goal is medical intervention to change the individual. But the limitation is that it ignores the environment. If a person in a wheelchair can't enter a building, the medical model says the problem is in their inability to walk. But it does not acknowledge the fact that the problem is with the infrastructure, not with the person. If there's a ramp, the person can actually enter the building. So that is the medical model which we discuss about. So the second is the social model, which says that society is the problem. Now, this modern advocacy based view argues that disability is created by a society that fails to accommodate diversity. And the core belief here is that impairment is the medical condition, but disability is the barrier. That is, it can either be attitudinal, the behavioral change which people have, or it can be the physical or the systemic barrier which the society itself creates. So as you can see, the green circle, in this, the arrows are pointing outwards, and this symbolizes that we need to change the world, not the person. So if we build a ramp, the disability, that is the barrier to entry, disappears, even if the impairment remains. So this basically empowers the individual by shifting the focus to inclusion and accessibility. Now, I wanted to look at the red circle. For decades, we have treated disability like a broken engine that needs a mechanic. But now, look at the green circle. This is where our work begins. We aren't here to fix children. We are here to fix the systems that fails to protect them. Now, I want you to imagine that you are in a room where everyone is required to communicate only via a specific complex sign language they've never been taught. So, all of you are sent into a room or are in a room where you are required to communicate, but only through a specific complex sign language that you've never been taught. Now, now that you imagine that scenario, my question is that in this moment, are you disabled because you lack the ability to speak? Or are you disabled because the environment hasn't provided you with the right interpreter or tool? I'll repeat my question. In this moment of being sent into a room where you have to speak via a certain language, but it's a complex sign language that you've never been taught, what do you think? Is the person who's there disabled because you lack the ability to speak? Or are you disabled because the environment hasn't provided you with the right interpreter or tool? Second. It's the second one. It's not your disability to speak. It's the disability of the environment that you've not been provided with the interpreter or with the tool through which you can converse, even if you're given a sign language which is complex to understand or which you have never been taught. So this is exactly what happens to children with disabilities in the justice system. When we don't have sign language interpreters in police stations or accessible reporting tools, we are creating the disability. We are the ones forcing the silence. Now we come to the part 3 of the session, which is intersectionality and disability. And together we call them complex vulnerabilities. And why we call them complex vulnerabilities is what we look ahead. To understand why certain children are more at risk than others, we have to look at the wheel of power and privilege. This framework, known as intersectionality, helps us to see that a child's safety isn't just about their disability, it's about where they sit in relation to power in our society. It's not just one barrier they face, but several overlapping ones that can be exploited by an abuser. Now, I want you all to look at the center of this wheel of power and privilege, which is the circle of power. This represents the power hub of our society. The closer a child sits to this center, for example, being able bodied, cisgender, and wealthy, the more invisible protections they have. The system is built for them significantly. And now, if we look at the marginalized section, which is the outer circle or the outer rings, so as we move to the outer rings, we see marginalization. When a child is non English speaking, living in poverty, or has a significant disability, they move further away from systemic protection. They aren't just different, they are pushed to the fringes where there's less oversight and more risk. Now, this is where the collision of identities happen. And this is what intersectionality is. It's the study of how these identities collide. It's not just disability plus gender, it's how being a disabled girl in a poor household creates a specific, unique vulnerability that a wealthy disabled boy might not face. Now, I want you all to imagine a child with significant communication disability who belongs to a marginalized caste and is living in a rural area. So there are 3 scenarios. It's a child with communication disability, first. Second, he or she belongs to a marginalized class. Third, it's he or she is living in a rural area. Now, an abuser doesn't see a disabled child. They see someone whose community may have fewer resources to fight back and whose voice might not be believed by the local police due to systemic bias. Now, because this child sits on multiple outer rings of the wheel, which is communication disability, marginalized class, and belonging from a rural area, the barriers to reporting are multiplied. They may depend entirely on a caregiver for communication, And if that caregiver is the abuser, the wheel of power is completely tilted against them. This is how intersectionality fuels the silent crisis of CSA. Now, I want you to answer a question that if a child has wealth but doesn't speak the dominant language, how does that wealth shield them? If a child has wealth but doesn't speak the dominant language, how does that wealth shield them? This is one scenario that a child has wealth, but he or she does not speak the dominant language of that particular area. Now, how will that wealth shield them? Even if they don't speak, child can hire a translator, he can hire language interpreters. Correct, he can hire language interpreters. Now imagine a scenario that I even take away the wealth. Dominant language वैसे नहीं आती है of that area. I even take away the wealth. Now the power of hiring or the ability of hiring a sign language interpreter also goes. And that adds a significant disability. Where did, and that adds also a question that where did their shield go? They had wealth, so they could hire a sign language interpreter, but now they don't even have wealth, so they cannot even hire a sign language interpreter. So this is how you can see how quickly the shield of protection vanishes as we move toward the outer edges of the wheel, which is the marginalized edges. Our job is to build a justice system that reaches all the way to the outer ring as well and is not just confined to the inner circle of the power wheel, wherein all the privileges are given to the people who are wealthy or they have almost everything which they can do to get justice. So this takes us to the next part, which is intertwined identities and risks, wherein first we talk about beyond disability. So when a child has a disability, society often stops looking further. But if that child is also from a marginalized caste or a low income family, their experience of disability changes completely, as we saw it in the example earlier. Now, a child with resources might have a ramp. A child without them has a locked door. Do you agree or not? That a child with resources, he can afford a ramp, he can go and get admission in an infrastructure which provides all of that. But a child without them has a locked door. Do we agree? Can I get a thumbs up from everyone for this? Agree. Thank you, Prabjeet. Thank you. Thank you so much, everyone. So their socioeconomic status determines if their disability is a challenge or a catastrophe, which takes us to the next point of heightened vulnerabilities. Now, this intersection doesn't just add risks, it multiplies them. We see a direct link between these intertwined identities and a lack of legal resources. If a system is biased against your caste or your poverty, you are less likely to be heard when you report abuse. Do you agree? That if the system is biased against your caste or your socioeconomic status, you are less likely to be heard when you report abuse. We do agree. So that is the fact that is there, that if your system or if the system believes in being biased towards your caste or your poverty, you will not get the justice which you would be hoping for. Now, this is exactly what makes children with disabilities soft targets for abusers. They exploit the gaps that society has already created. Now, it's an activity for all of you. I want you to take a minute and look at this picture closely and very carefully. And in this, we are auditing the system that creates the locks shown on the child's path. So you can see that there are multiple paths. There's disability path, socioeconomic path, societal path, language path, but there's also a door which is locked. Have you all looked at the picture? Guys, are we together in this? Thank you, everyone. So now I want you to look at these 3 risk barriers on the right board, which is neglect, lack of legal resources, and CSA. Now tell me, if this child is nonverbal and belongs to a marginalized caste, which single point is the absolute hardest wall to break down if they are seeking help from a standard justice system today? Lack of legal resources. Okay, Prabjeet, thank you. I'll repeat my
Negligence.
question. I'm sorry, were you saying something, Shubham?
Negligence, I guess.
Negligence, correct. Okay, now that we have first negligence. Now, one said legal resources, and Prabjeet said legal resources. Yashwant says laws, that is legal resources. And I think someone said first. Kali says all. Okay. Now let's understand. Now, if you say legal resources, look at the caste path. The caste path which is there on the table, the caste path, and the language path. These both paths are crossing the disability path. I hope it's not getting confused. So, caste path and language path, these both paths are crossing the disability path. And this is where the collision of bias and communication barriers begins. That there's caste path also, belonging from a marginalized caste, language aati nahi, disability bhi hai. So an inclusive system doesn't just see the disability, that is maybe the ability path. It must see the intersection, that is the caste and class path as well, that has already created a legal desert for that child. Our job isn't to fix the child, it's to build the bridges that ensure all legal resources reach all children, regardless of the paths they carry. This takes us to the next part of key considerations, that now we address the specific challenges which are being faced by these children. Now that we've looked at the wheel of power and how identities intertwine, now let's get specific. There are 4 pillars that represents the actual battlegrounds where inclusion is either won or lost for a child with disability. Now, there are 4 pillars. The first one is gender and disability. Gender isn't just a category, it's a risk factor. Girls and non binary children with disabilities face a double burden of stigmatization. When they report abuse, they are often met with skepticism or the assumption that they didn't understand what happened. Now, we must change how we listen. The second pillar is socioeconomic status and caste. This is where the heightened risk we discussed earlier becomes visible. Poverty and caste discrimination don't just limit resources, they create a lack of access to the very systems designed to protect children. A child at this intersection isn't just neglected by an abuser, they're often neglected by the state itself. Third pillar is family and caregiving. We must address the uncomfortable truth that extreme reliance on caregivers can create a power imbalance that abusers often exploit. When a household is already filled with stress or abuse, a child's path to disclosure is blocked. So we need to support families, but also create independent eyes on the child's safety. Can anyone give me a recommendation or something, that how do we create independent eyes on the child's safety? That even if they're with the caregiver or a family member, how do we create an individual eye on the child's safety? Okay, so I'll tell you my experience that while I was writing this particular paper, because it was based on disability, I keeping a diary for the person. Correct, it can be one of the measures. Shubham, thank you so much. What I did while I was doing my research in this particular paper, I was fortunate enough that I got an opportunity to go to a disabled school where they had their annual function. And when I went there, I saw multiple people because it was a disabled school. I saw children over there who was facing that disability, who were facing multiple disabilities. Over there, they were left with their teachers. So there was a kind of environment through which they could be protected. But then the second time, to gain better knowledge, I went to a caregiving center wherein children with disabilities were there, and that created a sudden shift in the members over there as well, because that was unexpected. People rarely go and visit orphanages or maybe um, the caregiving centers. Orphanages, I think we often do. कभी कभार कोई स्कूल में से कोई ले गया और समथिंग, और कॉलेज में से कोई ले गया कि we have to, or it's a compulsory visit to orphanages. At times it's a part of our curriculum, but caregiving centers, I have never seen that they're a part of a curriculum that you have to go and visit them. And when I went, that is when I saw a sudden shift in the people over there as well, because they didn't expect that. So this is where I think we can have independent eyes on the children. Then comes that we can go and monitor ourselves at times. Then comes the right-based perspective, which talks about, now finally we have the tools. The Rights of Persons with Disabilities Act 2016 is our strongest weapon. However, a law on paper is not a law in practice. Our mission is to close the gap between the policy and the implementation at the ground level. Now, I want you to look at these four pillars of challenges. Each one represents a lock on the door to justice. Now, if you were given the power to fix only one of these implementation gaps by tomorrow morning to best protect children in your local community, which column would you choose and why? I repeat my question. If you were given the power to fix only one of these implementation gaps by tomorrow morning, so which pillar would you choose the best to protect children in your local community and why? Okay, so now that we have responses, family and caregiving, since they are the closest to kids, gender and disability, then family and caregiving, by empowering kid to be open about everything. How will you empower the kid to be open about everything? I think Yashwin, you have written that point. How will you
That
empower the
was for the
kid?
previous question, actually.
Okay, for the previous question. Sorry. Okay, so now that we have perspectives, family and caregiving is the most common one in this. Now, if you think that family and caregiving is the one, then what about the rights-based perspective? Don't we need laws to support socioeconomic status? We do. And if we pick gender, that gender and disability is the one, Then caregiving structures often dictate that if a girl can even reach a reporter. Most of the time, that's the case, that they don't allow a girl to reach a reporter because they say that you cannot go and report a case. So the main thing is that you can't uphold up to the roof of child protection if one of these pillars is crumbling. So our advocacy must address all four to be truly effective, to create an inclusive society, in short. So we need to have all these four pillars go hand in hand and be there, that the advocacy must address all four of them. Which takes us to the next part of the session. Now that we understand how society creates barriers, we need to look at the why behind those barriers. In this part, we will explore Crip theory. Can anyone please tell me what is Crip theory? Have you ever heard about Crip theory? Or ever studied in your literature? If anyone is there from BA English Honors, have you ever heard about Crip theory? No. Okay. I just know that Crip is short for crippled. It is, Prabjeet. You're correct. So now this isn't just an academic framework, it is a tool for disruption. It forces us to question the normative assumptions, which I said earlier, that in this we are questioning the normative assumptions which have already been built by the society, that is the unwritten rules about how a child should move, speak, or behave, that often leave disabled children invisible to our current protection systems. Now, how did it emerge? The first is that we challenge the norms, that is, Crip theory destabilizes cultural construction of disability. It asks a radical question: who decided what able bodied looks like? It challenges the idea that disability is a defect and instead views it as a cultural construction. For our research, this means recognizing that a child's identity is fluid. A child isn't just disabled, they are navigating a world that has already decided that they're abnormal, which is the first step in making them vulnerable to abuse. Then is fluidity and intersections, which is the critique of abledness as well. And this highlights that when we critique abledness, we are critiquing a system that assumes everyone can hear, speak, and walk into a police station. If our reporting systems only work for abled children, then the system itself is the barrier. Crip theory helps us see that the vulnerability of a child isn't caused by their impairment, but by a society that refuses to adapt its normative protocols to meet them. Then we okay, critique of ableness is already done. Sorry guys, I forgot to move on to the PPT. Then we have the vulnerability and barriers. It highlights how dependence on caregivers and rigid reporting systems are products of an abled culture that ignores the diverse needs which are needed even by children with disabilities, that they need someone who can hear them, and that is why we need sign language interpreters in police stations or in the justice system itself. We come to the point of epistemologies and knowledge production. Now, I wanted to look at this picture. It says that there's nothing wrong with you. You don't need to be fixed or adjusted. You are not a work in progress. Now, the not over there is cut. It says that it's a work in progress. So you're complete as you are. Now, this brings us to epistemologies, the idea that disabled children are uh, often unique. So, this possesses a unique knowledge about safety and survival that able expert might miss. We must stop viewing these children as passive victims of their circumstances. Crip theory demands that we see them as active participants who have the right to demand shifts in policy based on their live reality. So they are the experts in their own lives. This brings us to an activity. I want you all to take a moment and look at this picture very carefully. Now, this is a standard child protection interview, a quiet room, or it's a one-on-one verbal questions are being going on. Now, using Crip theory, I want you all to tell me one normative assumption in this setting that might actually make a non-verbal or a neurodivergent child feel less safe or less heard. I'll repeat my question. I want you to give me, using Crip theory, one normative assumption in this setting that might actually make a non-verbal or neurodivergent child feel less safe or less heard. That kid is able to give enough answers on their own. Okay. Can we, like, no support or caregiver standing with them? Correct, Yashwin. Thank you. That they are not overwhelmed by the setting. Correct. So the main can be that there is no eye contact, there is no one who can convey what they're trying to say, or the child is standing still. So these explain that these are abled expectations which we expect anyone कि अगर eye contact नहीं है or the child is not standing still. So they are the basically we consider that if you're making eye contact or you're standing still, you are truth. You're speaking the truth or you're true. But if the child is not doing any of these, then the child is not speaking the truth. Lack of interpreter, that too originating from social construct of what constitutes as disability. Correct, Prabji. Thank you so much. So, by disrupting these assumptions, which we have got from you people, that is that there is no lack of interpreter, or there is no one who can stand by them and convey what they're trying to say, we realize that our standard way of seeking justice is actually built on a narrow definition of normal. To protect all children, we have to crip the system, make it flexible enough to fit the child, rather than forcing the child to fit the system. Have we? I hope we all are here together in this. That we genuinely have to make the system flexible to fit the child rather than making the child to fix the system. Which brings us to the next part of the segment, that is the Indian legal and policy frameworks. Can anyone let me know if you know about any of the policy frameworks for children with disabilities, for their rights? Anyone who knows even one single legal framework? POXO Act. Correct, Prabjeet. That's one of those. POXO Act. Any other? Thank you so much. Any other? Okay. Now, having identified the theoretical gaps, we now move into the Indian legal landscape. We will analyze where our current laws, that is POXO and RPWD Act, fall short for children with disabilities, and more importantly, how we can bridge these gaps through empowerment and a comprehensive protection approach. First, as said by Prabjeet, is now we look at the policy roadmap. First is the POXO Act, Protection of Children from Sexual Offences. It basically says that we need to create an environment which is child friendly in the legal systems, but it nowhere talks about creating an environment which is disability friendly also. So while it mandates, the gap over here is that while it mandates reporting and punishes offenders, it lacks specific provisions for children with communication or mobility impairments. Now, the barrier here is that courts rarely provide sign language interpreters or accessible testimony formats, making caregiver dependence a major roadblock to justice. Second is the Juvenile Justice Care and Protection Act, which talks about that it provides rehabilitation and care for at risk children. The gap over here is that child welfare committees often lack disability intervention training, and centers are missing accessible facilities or trained counselors. So, we must mandate institutional accessibility and include children in the actual design of the policies. Next, we have the RPWD Act, Right of Persons with Disability Act. Can anyone please tell me what do you understand with this act, or what do you think this act would be all about? Right of Persons with Disability Act. What would this act talk about? Or what does this act talk about? Okay. No worries. So this promotes inclusion on paper that it talks about, as the word itself says. It talks about the rights of the persons who are disabled, but it promotes inclusion on paper, but it has a very weak implementation regarding actual abuse prevention. So we must integrate disability safe education and strengthen our monitoring systems to move from broad policy to real world safety, which brings us to the last policy roadmap, which is National Policy for Persons with Disabilities. It came in 2006, but was updated in 2020 this earlier. So this safeguards the rights of the disabled and protects them from abuse. And the gap here is that there is a severe lack of monitoring frameworks and poor coordination between child protection agencies. So we must recommend creating state level monitoring committees specifically for CSA cases involving children with disabilities. Which brings us to the next part of this, that is structural barriers and vulnerabilities. Now, having analyzed how identities overlap to create risk, we must now confront the specific root causes found in our research. This segment moves from the silent crisis of systemic barriers to a concrete, comprehensive approach, concluding with our collective responsibility to build a future where every child's voice is recognized as a fundamental right. Can anyone please give me one or two points that what do you think could be the structural barriers or vulnerabilities which would be faced by children with disabilities? What could be the structural barriers? Lack of reporting mechanisms. Thank you, Prabjeet. Can I please get one or two more points? What do you think would be structural barriers? Lack of ramps and infrastructure. So, infrastructural is one of the barriers. Correct. Thank you, Rana. Okay. Lack of infrastructure. Correct, Afifa. Thank you. So, we move forward. First is lack of policy and rules, slow court proceedings. Correct. Thank you. Thank you so much for your inputs, guys. So we move on to the structural barriers. So the first one over here is dependence on the caregiver. wherein the leverage is that because children with disabilities often require significant caregiver support, abusers gain extreme control, creating a power imbalance that is easily exploited. There is a case example which I have used in my paper, that girls in the Oria shelter home were sexually abused by a staff in complete control, proving that without independent oversight, abusive patterns continue to be unchecked. And the global statistics already show that children with disabilities are 3.7 to 4 times more likely to experience sexual violence than the non disabled peers. The last is the consequence, that the consequence of this would be that absent independent caregiver allow abusive patterns to go on continuously. The second is the communication barriers. First, in this is reporting difficulties. We've been talking about this since the beginning of the session, that there is difficulties in reporting cases. Why? Because of lack of sign language interpreters. So, hearing and speech impairments make traditional reporting nearly impossible without specialized support, and that is why we've been emphasizing that we need a sign language interpreter in the judicial system and in the police stations itself. This is a case of a Jharkhand. A mute deaf girl's statement could not be recorded simply because police failed to provide a sign language interpreter, a failure of system, not the victim. It was the failure of system that the child could not get justice. It was not the failure of the victim that the child could not speak. And this was one of the most disheartening cases I had researched about while I was writing my presentation, because such examples genuinely open your um, own insight into all of this, that wherein we think that we're living in a diverse country or in an inclusive society, it actually isn't an inclusive society just because it is inclusive for us. Just because it's inclusive for us, it's not inclusive for everyone. It still lacks at various points which are still often overlooked. The third point in this is the global insights that due to deep seated prejudice and ableism, disabled children, they're often viewed as unreliable witnesses, leading to their voices being dismissed by the very systems meant to protect them. So there's reduced credibility in the systemic disregard and stigma. Systemic disregard is all about that how the systems are lacking in not providing the sign language interpreters or the advocates who can understand their language. So this is the deep-seated prejudice against ableism, and the research also itself shows that disabilities in children lead to a reduction in their credibility as the witness, because there's no one who would ever believe, and that is one of the preconceived notion of the abusers also, that there would hardly be people who would believe what the child is trying to say, or there's a hardcore belief in them that if it's a caregiver, obviously the parents would trust the caregiver more than the child. Why? Because it's always believed that it's a medical problem. Disability is a medical problem. It needs to be treated. It's not a societal problem. तो उस पॉइंट पर जाकर it's just that there is a trust issue, or the systemic disregard is also one of the important ones, that the system also does not trust them at times as to what the child is trying to say, and they genuinely need justice instead of just ignoring them. This brings us to the last part of the presentation, that how we can have a collective responsibility and how we can genuinely work towards creating an inclusive society. Now that we have spent time unmasking the silence and understanding the complex web of vulnerabilities that children with disabilities face, now we move into the most critical part of our session, that is the blueprint for change. These final slides outline how we move from being observers of this crisis to being the architects of a system that truly protects every child, regardless of how they communicate or where they come from. Now, the first point we talk about is that we more than we work on empowering bringing the change in the policies, we first need to empower children with disabilities, and that is what our NGO also works for. Not for disability, not for disabled children, but we do empower children by making them aware of the changes. As a member of the facilitation department itself, I go and deliver sessions in schools, and I make children aware about the kind of changes they have in their in their adolescent ages. So that is directly empowering the child and letting the child know that these are the changes you will have. These are the things you can allow someone to be in touch with you, but beyond this, you cannot allow someone to touch you. So now that we are spreading awareness, or we are empowering children, how about we even empower children with disabilities? So now how we can do this is that we can have comprehensive sexuality education, which is that information is a protection. For many children with disabilities, sexuality is treated as a taboo or irrelevant topic, not just in disabled children. With my own experience, I can say that this is a taboo even with the able bodied people. Because when I go and deliver a session, it's not like children don't know anything, they know everything. But as and when I would say the word sexual, they would be like, "Ho, Didi, what are you talking about?" But it is as important as it is to not just know and not talk about it, because everyone can have different perspective, everyone can have different opinion. So to even spread awareness on that, sexuality education is one of the primary agendas, is one of the primary main thing to be done, even not just with the able-bodied children, but also with children with disabilities, so that they get to know more about themselves and more about their rights and how they can genuinely protect themselves. So we can do this by making education fully accessible using Braille, sign language, or simplified logic. We give children the vocabulary to understand their bodies and recognize when a boundary is crossed. Second is independent reporting avenues. A child shouldn't have to rely solely on a caregiver to report abuse, especially if that caregiver is the source of the risk. We must facilitate communication through specialized tools like Maru gestures or digital reporting apps that allow a child to speak for themselves independently and safely. Third is peer support networks. Isolation is an abuser's best friend. By encouraging children to children connections, we build a security net. Peer networks allow children to share experiences, validate each other's feelings, and realize they are not alone. There is immense safety in a connected community of peers. Now, we can understand this with a very common example. When we are in our adolescent ages, we try a lot of new things under the influence of our peers. Just because my friend is going to a dance class, I will go. Just because my friend is learning drawing, I will also learn. Is that true or not? We must have had those kind of experiences in our adolescent years. True. Can I get more thumbs up, please? Did we have it or did we not have it? We had it. So same is the case for children with disabilities also, that if we create peer support networks, even they can come forward and speak up for themselves. Okay. Now, I want you all to imagine that you are designing a safety toolkit for a non-verbal child entering into a new school or a shelter. Now, looking at these three bubbles, that is education, reporting, and peers, which one do you think acts as the foundational tool that makes the other two possible? I'll repeat my question. You are designing a safety toolkit for a non-verbal child who is going to enter a new school or a shelter home. So you need to look at these three bubbles, which is education, reporting, and peers. Which one do you think acts as the foundational tool that makes the other two possible? First, education. Okay. Rana, peers. Okay. Education. Okay. Any more responses? Education, peers, not reporting. Okay. So now that you've picked education and peers, if you pick education, explain me that you can't report what you don't have the words to describe, correct? Education is the one which provides you that words to describe what you want to report. And now if none of you have picked up reporting, but if you pick up reporting, that explains that a child needs, if they don't know what is happening in the first place, how they will be able to report, correct, Prabjeet? And that is why we are emphasizing on giving them comprehensive sexuality education and spreading awareness, just like we are spreading it throughout the society in able-bodied children, and that is what we want for children with disabilities as well. So exactly what you've said is that empowerment is a cycle. Education gives them the knowledge, reporting gives them the voice, and peers give them the courage. So our role is to ensure all three are accessible and integrated into every program. This takes us to the next section of transforming protection into practice, which is the first point in this is integrating disability into existing CSA protocols. Can anyone please let me know how will you integrate disability into the existing CSA protocols? Are the communication and the physical needs of children with disabilities ignored or not? Yes, they are ignored. So, the first step in this is a structural audit to ensure that every existing safety protocol is natively inclusive from the starting itself. Creating accessible tools for victim support. This is taught to us by the social model, and the social model teaches us that the environment is the barrier. We must provide tools that meet the child where they are, whether that is through pictorial reporting aids, simplified legal language, or sensory friendly support spaces. Then we have training staff in disability sensitivity skills. Can anyone please let me know how can you train the staff? Is it so easy to go and approach the staff and say that, okay, today we'll train you for disability sensitivity skills? Do you think they will so easily agree? They won't. There will be a lot of people who will not agree to it. They would even say that, what are we to do with this? This has got nothing to do with us. We've been doing all of this since ages, so we don't need any sensitivity skills. But that is not the point. The police, the by broadening the current protocols, we can do that. So by okay the police, the judicial officers, and social workers, they are the gatekeepers of justice. So this training isn't just about empathy. This is not just about training the caregivers. It's also about training the police, the judicial officers, and the social workers. And it is not just about creating empathy, it's about capacity. So we must equip them with the specific skills to interact with and believe victims who communicate differently. Advocacy for mandatory sign language interpreters. We've been talking about this since the beginning of the session, that communication is a fundamental right, not a luxury. By mandating interpreters in every police station and court, remove. Yes, Yashwin.
Oh, no worries. Continue.
We remove one of the most significant societal barriers that keep these children in a silent crisis. Then is strengthening oversight in local care homes. Now, how we can do this is that, as we discussed in intertwined identities, children in institutional care face heightened vulnerabilities due to extreme dependency. Mandatory independent monitoring of care homes is essential to break the circle of silence that often protects abusers. Partnering with disability rights advocacy groups. Now, true inclusion follows the philosophy of nothing about us without us. So, we cannot design protection strategies for this community without designing them with the experts who live these experiences every day. This brings us to the recommendations for inclusive protection, that how we can genuinely create an inclusive society. The first in this is retrofitting justice, that just as we retrofit buildings with ramps for physical access, we must also retrofit our justice systems for communication access. Can anyone please give me a point that how can we retrofit our justice systems? We can retrofit the infrastructure by building up ramps or having um an infrastructure which is disabled friendly. But how can we retrofit our justice system? Inclusive policies and laws, law enforcement. Okay. Thank you. So this means that we have to mandate that every police station and court has the tools to hear a child, whether through sign language interpreters or pictorial aids that allow non-verbal victims to describe their experiences. Second is sensitization, which is moving from pity to rights-based training. We need to transform the mindset of the police and the judiciary. Sensitivity isn't just about feeling pity for a child, it's about recognizing their legal right to a fair and accessible process. This training shifts the focus from the child's limitations to the system's obligation to provide justice. Independent advocacy is another point in this. A child's voice should never be filtered solely through a primary caregiver, especially when that caregiver may be a part of a high risk or abuse filled household. We must provide independent advocates whose only loyalty is to the child's safety and their rights to be heard. Then is strict monitoring of care homes. How can you think we can monitor the care homes? We can together bring about the changes in the policy system. We can approach the government for it, but how can we keep a strict monitoring of the care homes? CCTVs. Thank you, Prabjeet. But who will monitor the CCTVs even if we put them up? Because I like, who do you think would have the access to those CCTVs? Agar CCTV laga dein and they have the access to it, do you think they would keep it on 24/7? The social system that checks in, like USA. Independent social workers who visit the kids in homes. Thank you, Yashwin. Thank you, Afifa. CCTVs can be one of them, but the control of CCTVs has to be with someone who is genuinely monitoring after them. Auditors. Correct, Shweta. We can have auditors also for this. So, institutional spaces can easily become circles of silence. We are calling for rigorous, independent, and unannounced monitoring of local care homes to ensure they are sanctuaries of safety, not hotspots for unchecked neglect or abuse. Inclusive pedagogy in protection sectors. This means redesigning how we teach child protection professionals. We must embed disability theory and intersectional logic into the very foundation of how social workers and workers in justice are trained, so they are prepared for the diverse reality of all children. Universal access to justice systems. Inclusion is not a specialized add on for a few. It must be universal. A justice system that cannot hear every child, regardless of how they communicate or where they come from, is not a justice system. It is a selective one. So, our goal is a system that is accessible to all by default. Which brings us to the last slide of the session, that is a future of equality. But there must be incentive for those monitoring care homes. This goes beyond the monetary incentives such as recognition, award programs, etc. It does go beyond the monetary incentives. It's not about giving them rewards or something. I said that you can install CCTVs, but then the access to that has to be with someone who can monitor them 24/7 or can keep a check on them. Because if we install CCTVs and we also give the control to the care home centers itself, that somewhat might not give us the full scenario even then. And that is why I said that either once in a while we can just go and visit ourselves. So even they know that anyone can come, because that's a place you can go. It's not that you have to take a permission from someone, can we come? You can go to orphanage yourself, so you can even go to these centers yourself. So it's better that at times we go and individually go and look into the that is like grassroots level of every problem, and that is where you find that how the people are there in the society beyond what your perspectives are to it. So for the core philosophy for this is nothing about us without us. So this is the heartbeat of the disability rights movement. It reminds us that we cannot design systems of protection in a vacuum. To be effective, children with disabilities and their advocates must be at the table where policies are written. We move from doing things from them to doing things with them. The goal is to have a justice system that hears every child. The ultimate measure of our success is a justice system that is truly universal. It should not matter if a child communicates through speech, sign language, pictorial aids, or gestures. A system that only hears the verbal and the able bodied is a system that fails its most vulnerable citizens by design. The final thought on this is that true inclusion is the only path to protection. We end where we began, with the choice between models. If we continue to see disability as a medical problem to be cured, we will continue to fail at protecting children. But if we see the societal barriers as the problem, we realize that inclusion is our most effective shield against abuse. Inclusion isn't just a goal, it is the only way to ensure every child is safe. So now this brings us to the end of the session. But before I end it formally and I take up your questions, I want you to think of one word that describes the future of equality we have discussed today. You can either type it in the chat box or you can unmute yourself and speak. Inclusion. Thank you, Prabjeet. Can I have some more, please? Respect for all. Correct? Can I have one or two more? I can repeat my question. I'll repeat my question that I want you to think of one word that describes the future of equality we have discussed today. Any one word which comes to your mind when you hear the word future of equality. Rights to speak openly. Correct. Thank you, Shweta. So yes, whether empathy. True, Rana. Thank you so much. So whether the word is justice, voice, empathy, safety, equity, respect, this is all the echo we want this I want this session to leave behind. So thank you so much everyone for becoming the architects for a more inclusive world. With this, I end the session, and I am open to any questions and any one of you would like to ask. Thank you so much, Yashwin. Over to you. Thank you so much, everyone.
Yeah. Thank you, Vedika. It was really wonderful session, and thank you for all the insights. It was really an eye-opening session for me personally. So thank you so much. And if you have any questions, everyone, so you can maybe type in the chat box, or you can raise your hands, and we'll take up the questions. But before you leave, I would request you all to please fill the feedback and the post session form. Uh, it will help us to bring more such sessions, and also for us to measure the impact that we're uh, trying to create here. The QR code is on the screen, you can scan it, and the yeah, it is also there in, thank you, Rana, it is also there in the chat box. You can take it from there as well. And also, before you leave, I just wanted to pitch in one more thing. Vidika, can you? Yeah.
Move the slide, sure.
Yeah.
Uh,
So as you know that our organization, we are an NGO, and we are currently running this fundraiser. So this is where you uh, you can maybe empower us to empower 10,000 more children and 32,000 mothers to prevent child sexual abuse. That is what our motto is for running this fundraiser. And yeah, if you have uh, you know if you want to help us in any way, then you can maybe go to our fundraiser. The QR code is there in this on the screen, and Rana will also share it in the chat box. And yeah, that was for the session. Now I would also request Tanmay if you want to uh, pitch in a few words for everyone, and if anyone else would like to ask any questions, they can do that.
Thank you so much, Yashwin. Uh, Before I start, I would also request कि if we have any questions, we can put in the chat box, and Vedika can answer it or Yashwin can answer it in case related to the whole slide. If not, then we also have the WhatsApp group, right, where we can share the questions. And even if no questions, if you have any suggestions, we would really like that. Um, first things first, Vedika, it was a beautiful session. So thank you so much. Also appreciating the whole R&D team, the amount of efforts as a team you people have put in, it's beyond words, whether it is with respect to marketing or having made this whole presentation and then presenting it, taking mocks. So there is a lot of hard work that has gone, and वो सब दिख रहा था in the presentation how flawless it was. Vidushi had to leave, but then she also had beautiful message I would be sharing with you people. uh, Besides that, I think about children with disability, एक तो CSA चाइल्ड सेक्सुअल अब्यूज इन itself is a topic जिसके बारे में कोई बात नहीं करता. And to add on, when we talk about children with disabilities, ये ऐसी बात हो जाती है two very rare topics जिसके ऊपर we as a society हम ध्यान देते हैं, उन दोनों के बारे में बात करना, which makes it a very 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 critical topic to talk about. And one reflection that I have with respect to CSA, because हम उसी field में काम कर रहे हैं, we know the depth of it. Children with disability as an organization अभी हमने शुरू नहीं किया, but we would maybe at some point would love to do that, to train the teachers or maybe the caretakers so that we can start something with them as well. आई थिंक 2 days बैक मैं और राहुल एक मीटिंग में थे वेयर वी वर टॉकिंग अबाउट बॉडी पॉजिटिविटी एंड बॉडी इमेज एंड डॉक्टर संगीता हु इज द फाउंडर ऑफ एनफोल्ड इंडिया, एनफोल्ड ऑल्सो वर्क्स ऑन चाइल्ड सेक्सुअल अब्यूज प्रिवेंशन. तो उन्होंने एक क्वेश्चन पूछा कि जब आप बॉडी इमेजिंग की बात कर रहे हो, एंड इट स्टेड विद मी. आई एम सॉरी, मैं थोड़ा हिंदी भी यूज़ कर रही हूँ बीच में, बट I wanted to explain it with raw emotions. So she asked a question कि अब बॉडी इमेजिंग या बॉडी पॉजिटिविटी एक फिजिकली डिसेबल्ड चाइल्ड को कैसे समझाओगे, राइट? व्हेन वी टॉक अबाउट ओबेसिटी और वी टॉक अबाउट वेरिएशन इन स्किन केयर्स, आप वो समझा सकते हो बच्चों को, बट देन इफ अ पर्सन और अ चाइल्ड फील्स कि वो फिजिकली फिट ही नहीं है, तब उनको बॉडी इमेज वाली चीज़ कैसे समझाओगे? सो मे बी आई वुड लव एक दो रिस्पॉन्स फ्रॉम यू पीपल कि हम कैसे समझाएंगे उनको अबाउट बॉडी पॉजिटिविटी टू अ चाइल्ड. हाँ जी वेदिका.
Maybe pictorially.
थ्रू पिक्टोरली, ओके. But then, as in the pictures, I see an ideal image. I see two hands, I see two eyes, I see everyone is physically fit around me. But then, when I see myself, I am on a wheelchair, my spine is bent. So, how I would be very body positive about myself? Hanji Yashwin.
uh, I think having having the kids exposed to people who are adult and also with disabilities, I think that way would help them understand that no, having two hands, two legs, two eyes, a mouth to speak, ears that can hear is not what is the correct thing to have. You as as a person with disability, you yourself is complete, as the Vedic also mentioned in the Crip theory, that what we need to what we need to make sure is that the kids who are having the disabilities, they are also exposed and also know such people in their lives who basically with whom they can relate. So that is one way that where we can start having talks about body positivity and what uh, what an ideal body should or should not look like. So yeah, that's one way. Others, if you have any suggestions or thoughts, you can pitch in.
Thank you, Yashwin. Prabjeet is saying by introducing them to body positive media. Shweta is saying by creating positive mindset first, then build their self confidence. So yes, by building self confidence. So कल उस दिन जब discussion हुई, I think 2 days back की बात है, we were also giving the same things by telling them, or maybe by making them understand that there have been people with disabilities who have maybe swimmed an ocean or has done very good academically, right? So then she cross questioned. She asked ki, for a disabled child, is it important to do something extraordinary to make themselves feel that they are as capable as us, right? The answer is no. So what we are saying is correct, but then one concept that she introduced us to, which I feel कि मैंने कहीं ना कहीं मिस कर दिया था. So this was a reflection and a takeaway that I had, that I wanted to share. So she said that the first thing that we need to make people understand that everything is science or nature, right? I mean, the body that I have right now, the features that I have right now, it is not because I've done something extraordinary, right? It was a simple biological process. Two chromosomes met, and then I was the one who was born, right? So, to make people and the children understand that whatever condition we are in right now as a body, it has been provided by the nature. So, this is the first part which is beyond our control. What is in our control is how, with this body that I have, how much grateful I am for that. And secondly, with this body, how much I am able to, you know, do certain things up to a capability. जो मेरे हाथ में है ही नहीं, मैं उसके बारे में why should I worry about, and why should I regret throughout my life. And one another thought that stayed with me with respect to disability was कि we think doing something extraordinary would make them feel good, but for them, surviving every day where they are seeing hundreds of us or hundreds of people without disability, and then they see themselves a little different. I mean, just imagine the thought they are going through every day. And then above that, if we put pressure on them of doing something extraordinary for them to prove themselves, khud ko hi. So again, a battle and challenge for them. So yes, so I think kahin na kahin as a society there are so many small things that we can do and we can be more mindful of. And I think it has been a great initiative for R&D for doing ये सब चीज़ें. And as discussed by Vedika, when we talk about Boxo, when we talk about JJ, when we talk about society, the infrastructure is lacking a lot. But because each one of us, we can put efforts and make it maybe अपने individual level पे, personal level पे a better place for everyone to live in, right? So, with that reminder, I would just like to close the meeting. And as Yashwin mentioned as well, Bachpan India is an organization. We can put up Hamara website as well. You can go through it. And right now, the fundraising is going on for the same. We majorly conduct sessions free of cost in government schools. So for that, we provide them the toolkit as well. So I would really, really, really request that if we can contribute certain amount to the organization, we would love that. And if you people can also share it amongst yourselves, because very honestly, we are on the journey to raise 10 lakh rupees, because child sexual abuse एक ऐसा टॉपिक है जिसके because we purely work upon child sexual abuse, तो CSRs भी इतना सपोर्ट नहीं करते हैं सिर्फ child sexual abuse या sex education को, because it is a taboo. So we think हमारा major crunch of funding will come through fundraisers, crowdfunding that we do. So would really love that. And before going, would love to hear a bit about our experience in the meeting.
You all can also unmute and give a give your feedbacks and how did you like this session, and what are you one thing that you are also taking away from this session.
Thank you so much, Prabjeet. So, Prabjeet is saying the session was really great and informative and thought provoking. The speaker made it 10 times better by asking questions and introducing certain activities. Afifa is saying informating session. Oh, I think Shweta asked. I have a question. Why there is Shweta is there in the meeting? No. There's a taboo of sexual harassment because we don't even talk about sexual feelings. We don't even talk about the four private parts that we have. So इतना हमने taboo associate कर दिया है that we feel all the shame is associated amongst these things. And because हमें छोटे होते से ही no one taught us the right names, hence the shame and hence the shame with sexual harassment. So great, guys. Again, an appreciation, and I would really love if we can put up the update in the meeting with respect to the feedback that we got and the photo if we have
Yeah.
taken any.
Yes.
And Hanji Vedika.
Please, I would love to share one thing with all of you. She is not there anymore in the session, I think. Yeah, she's not there. My so she was my HOD of Department of Public Administration, the subject I'm pursuing my honors in. She was there throughout the session. So I had just shared the link with her that ma'am, it would be a privilege to be like to have your presence in the session. And she was there throughout. She had sent the feedback in the chat also, and then she had just texted me on the WhatsApp itself. I mean, she being the HOD of the department, and I am presenting that paper to her because this was all out of all the three papers I got published. For this single paper, she had specifically called me and told me that this is one of the best papers you've written. And that kind of feeling itself, because to be very honest, I was so nervous. I even called Yashwin in the starting of the meeting that Yashwin, I'm being very, it's full of anxiety, mujhse nahi hoga and all of that. I've been texting my friends, guys, can you please join? Apparently there were only a few who joined and then they left, but it's like out of nowhere you get a constant support from your professor. So I think it's truly an amazing to have such a beautiful team I have. And Tanmay, I've always admired you for the kind of person you are. And so I admire Yashwin as well and the other co-members of mine. Thank you so much, everyone, for making it so easy. मतलब जितना I think more than me, Tanmay, Yashwin would have invested, Tanmay would have invested, Rana and all the other team members from R&D have invested much more time and efforts than what I did. So thank you so much, everyone. Thank you. It would not have been possible without each one of you being there. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Vedika. And
Thank you
yes,
so much, Vedika. And I also feel people reciprocate what they receive. So it is both ways. And I think it is a very big deal that, the professor was there throughout. And I think Prabjeet is also saying that writing papers is an important aspect, but giving life to those words with your communication skills made the session so much better. And agreed. I mean, I know you have been a facilitator, but then again, there was a sense of, confidence and the way you were making things relatable. Although we had our cameras off, but people were, responding and being a part of those questions through chat box. So it is an achievement in itself. So kudos guys, and I'll have a meeting R&D के साथ अलग से very soon. But अभी के लिए I have to leave. So bye bye. Take care.
Thank you so much, Tanmay. Thank you for being there
thank you,
throughout.
Tanmay.
Means a lot.
Thank you so much, and I also learned a lot. And bye, Ashwin. Bye,
Bye.
Vedika.
Bye,
Bye,
Tanmay. Good
Ryan.
night.
Bye, everyone. Bye, everyone. Good
Take
night.
care.
Thank you everyone for joining. We are also ending the session. Uh, we'll be sharing the feedback form and everything to the registered participants. And if you are from the main team, so the main group is there, you'll please fill the feedback forms, whoever is left.
Thank you
Thank
so
you for
much,
joining.
everyone. Thank you.